Hello, I'm going to show you how I manufacture or craft one of my hiking sticks that I actually sell to the general public. Now, I will take you along and it will be a very brief intro into each procedure I go through. Now, various people or manufacturers or crafters will have their own take, their own methods, and indeed their own viewpoints on how you go about manufacturing a stick. What you will be seeing from me is quite simply how I do it, or shall we say some of the methods I employ to make a stick. You're obviously not going to see the harvesting side of it. That is a separate topic in its own right, which I will cover. And indeed what you will see here will be a very brief overview, as in a short video I can't cover everything I do. But I'm going to take you along on a particular stick that a customer has requested. So I'm going to take you along on that one. But bear in mind, this is only a very brief overview. So from here, I'm now going to go and select a piece of wood, or shall I say a stick, that I'm now going to start my process. Right then, as you can see, I've got a couple hundred pieces there, and that they're fully seasoned. I'm going to select one. Inevitably 90% of the sticks along there and in behind, wherever I take one, select one, I'm going to have to straighten to some degree. So I've got that process to do. But yes, this here has been seasoned for around 12 months, and they're good to go, those are. Right then, I've selected the piece of hazel I want to use. I know it's hazel, I marked it with an H, hazel. If this was in the pile for a couple of years and it sat there, it could become unrecognisable due to degradation to the bark through the drying and being moved about. So I always mark it, I know what it is. I've looked at the ends, no splits. And indeed I can see I'm going to take a couple inches off each end to achieve the length I want, and that mitigates any chances of the wood being damaged and any splits running back up through the stick. I'm now checking the length of the stick. I'm also looking for splits due to the drying process, and I can identify areas that I want to investigate underneath the bark. I'm also looking for insect or wildlife damage, wildlife from when I took it, because it could have been wet, windy, cold, and I just took the stick, put it in the bundle, and I didn't inspect it to the point where I could notice anything. It was just brought back, dried, racked, and left. But now I'm just inspecting. No, there's no damage from wildlife. Now I'm looking for insect damage. I can't see any insect damage from when I took it from the woods. And on top of that, if anything had gotten into it, had made its way out, and on top of that, from this end, anything got in this end, and I can see no damage. It's good. So now I'll go on to the stick itself. There's a few darker patches of bark I wanted to investigate, because, you know, it's pointless taking it to the next stage of straightening, investing that time and energy, and then move on to the sanding and shaping part of the stick making, only to find you've got a rotten patch or a piece of wood that is, shall we say, degraded to the point it's not worth going any further, and you've wasted all that time and energy. So you really ought to put good time and energy in this stage of it, and you can eliminate having to throw the stick away after you've invested any time into it. So yes, I scraped this piece of bark off, and I can see I've got good white quality wood underneath. So the visual inspection's been done. I now need to just tap it. So you just get a instrument. I'm using the back of this. It has a solid spine, and you'll hear a solid ring to it. If it was rotten, or it had any hollows or any, shall we say, imperfections inside that, you would hear it would be dull. You would instantly know. But that is good quality wood there. I've just done another inspection on a piece of darker bark there. Same thing again. And then I just always do the test on the ground just to see how the sound is with the stick. You can clearly hear that is dry, solid wood there. Like I said, it'll always be duller and more of a thump rather than a clear, crisp ring. And yes, this stick now is of a quality I can now take on to the next process of manufacture. Right, I've got my actual jig in place on a workstation. It's secure, and I've got my source of heat, which is a heat gun, quite a powerful one. I've got my protectors ready for the wood when I put the stick in place, and I'm also now fully, shall we say, ready to use this jig, which will apply the pressure to the stick in a reverse curve to the stick's original curve, which will then take the bend out, and I'll now demonstrate that. So just looking down this stick, if I turn it, you can probably see, or just about see, there are some bends. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to line my eyes down through here till I find a bend, and in the dip of the bend I will, with a marker pen, just put an X. Now that X will indicate that it needs to be facing upwards, because the car jack is going to push upwards and straighten that bow. So the pressure's coming up from underneath and straightening it. But first I've got to find that particular curve that I want to take out. So as I've just said, I'm going to look down it like this, spin it around till I find a curve that I believe I want to take out, which I can see I've got one here. I'm just going to get the marker pen and I've marked it. So from there you can see I've just put a circle with an X. I know I've now got to use that as my reference point for the centre of that pushing force from below it. I'm now going to apply heat through this gun to the wood. You don't want to be too close to burn the wood. Obviously heat wood, there's a fire risk, so you've got to be careful of that. It ideally wants to be hot enough where it's uncomfortable to place your hand on it. Bear in mind you don't want to burn yourself, so take caution and care with that. But yeah, if it's, you know, it shouldn't be bearable to put your hand on to start with. A few inches off the wood and just gradually work it around. If you leave it too long in one spot, it will smoulder and you will damage the wood by discolorating it and possibly splitting it. You see I'm just working it around, and this is what you would do till you get enough heat in that wood to put it in the jig. Right then, I have the stick in place in the jig. As you can see, it's resting on these bars going through. I've got the X in the up position, which is the reverse curve I want to create to get a straight stick. I've got plastic shields on the metal and soft rubber against the wood, and that's in the other two positions as well, same setup. That's protecting the wood. It's warm, you can just feel it, it's hot, and I've wound the pressure up now to gain, looking along it, a straight bit of should we say, angle on that piece of wood there. Obviously I do have other bends which I've got to take out to achieve the straightness. This will take experience, time, patience, and ultimately a good eye to achieve a straight stick by this method. It is slower than using the, should we say, other method on the jig, which is the wheel method. But when you've got heavier gauged wood, this method is possibly more viable. But now it's warm, I now have to let this stick cool down in this position under this amount of pressure, and this takes a little bit of time. So this is the sort of time in the process you would go and have a chocolate biscuit and a cup of coffee. Right, I'm another 2 curves into this straighten. It's starting to come together. I've got a few other small ones I can see and I can identify. But once you start to get it straight, you can then do the little bits of tweaking. So basically, I've got probably a few small curves to do now, and then I shall be ready to move on to the next process. Right, I've straightened the stick to where I want it to be, and now I'm going to top and tail the stick. Just basically take a few millimeters off the crown and the tip, just so I can get it back to virgin wood. Have a quick little inspection to make sure there's no cracking through the drying process. From there, I will then determine, cutting via either end, the dimensions of the stick, i.e. the length and how I want to do the crown. If it's going to be a flat crown, I will literally cut it flat. If it's going to be peaked, I will cut it at an angle. And if it's going to be what I call a round or a domed stick, I shall cut it with a slight little pyramid, shall I say, just to help ease me when I'm shaping to bring around. Basically the philosophy is less wood I've got to manually take off with the rasps. So yes, now I'm going to do that now and get this stick cut to size, and I'll come back to you then. Right, I've just done that. I've taken the stick down to its length that is going to be what I'm now going to manufacture that stick to, which is 117 centimeters. I've topped this one on the crown, as you can see, and I've already brought it up into, shall we say, the initial shaping stages of the peak, where that thumb will be able to go over and provide a nice comfy grip on the top. I've also taken, shall we say, 6 inches or so off the bottom, got down to virgin wood, and it's looking good there. So I have no concerns now with this stick at this stage going forward. This is a good solid piece of wood, and I'll be happy to put my name to this product when it's finished. Now I now have to, from this stage, drill a hole where the lanyard's going to be, and in relation to the hand, and as I interpret the user's going to use it. So that's my next step now. I'm going to put the hole for the lanyard. Right then, I've determined where I want to put my hole. The person this stick's going to be crafted for is of the smaller framed size, so I've just sort of like felt my way around the handle, and I've deduced where I believe the correct position would be. Now I'm going to drill the hole. That will be with a electric drill with a correct size drill bit. I am looking to move over to a vintage drill, which is of the manual type and no power. I no longer use any power tools in the sanding, shaping or finishing of my products anymore, and I'm trying to get to the point there's no electric tools or power tools, shall I say, used within the process of my stick making, and I've made some big steps towards that. Like I say, I no longer use it to sand, shape and finish power tools, so this will be the next one to be replaced in regards to that. Yeah, so I'm going to drill this hole and then we'll move on out into the woodshed, where shall we say, the dirty and dusty start of the project will now move into that phase. Right, I'm all set up in the woodshed. I've got a mask. Obviously, even though I'm not using power tools, I can still expect plenty of dust. Bringing you around then, I've got a big rasp. Obviously that's good for shaping or taking off big quantities of wood. The smaller one for slightly more delicate work. Now I have a knife which I can use to get into all the little bits and digging out and everything like that, and part of the debarking process I'm going to do now. This here is basically my gauge for my copper tips. I now have to, shall we say, make a compression fitted copper tip to go on the end of this stick. So that means I will have to like chamfer down one of the ends, or the end I'm going to use for the tip, and then get it to the correct size, which allows me to fit this using a compression method on the end. These discs are really hard, they don't buckle, they're not of the paper quality, they're of that very hard backing plate type. Because they don't break down when you use them in, shall we say, a hard and aggressive manner, these are really excellent for shaping sticks, the tips, the crowns, and taking off, shall we say, substantial parts of the stick that needs to come off to give you the shape. So I rate these better than sandpaper for this stage of the shaping process. As I've said, obviously a mask, and I'm going to now start this process. Right then, I've got some old overalls on because I'm going to get extremely dirty and messy. You don't want to take this fine stuff into the house and everybody breathe it in. If you're doing a quantity of sticks, this dust does mount up. So I shall be putting a mask on, and then I'll quickly show you how I debark the stick at this stage. Some of my sticks I do a natural range where I leave the bark and I just gently sand the bark in areas that need sanding, and then I'll just go over with a very light finishing sand on the areas which are, shall we say, acceptable to the hand, and they feel, shall we say, not too rough where it feels like it did need sanding or finishing. So you have various choices, but most of my sticks will be of a semi-debarked nature. That's how my customers seem to prefer them, and I will show you how I go about that now. Right then, I've got the stick wedged in, and now I'm just going to draw the knife down as you would a draw knife, and all I'm doing is working down through, and you will see I'm taking the bark off quite easily. I like to leave some of the inner bark on if I can, to provide a kind of feature point, so I'm always aware of how much I'm taking off at any given time. But as you can see, the knife is a hard edged one, fixed blade, and it is very sharp, and I'm able to use this one in this configuration. Obviously with knives and doing this process, be careful, safety around knives and that, but I'm using this as kind of like a semi-draw knife, or in the action that you could use a draw knife. So as you can see, I'm debarking like this, and I'll continue that till I get my desired effect regarding the bark. So I'll continue that and I'll bring you back in a moment. Right then, I took most of the bark off with a knife and I've got my stick to where I want it to be, which, as you can see, is pretty furred up. I've left some of the inner bark on because like I said, I shall be using that for an effect. Now I'm going to just take the actual roughness and the fur of the wood that's been left behind because of the knife drawing over it. Will come off now with this hard sanding disc that I showed you just a moment ago. It's hard, so you can get a good firm purchase and go over the stick with, but there's enough flexibility where it will mould slightly into the palm of your hand, allowing you to follow the curves of the stick. I'm only going to do that just to remove the worst of the furring of the wood. I will then come back to you and discuss the next possibility. If you were to add a deer antler to a stick, what you would have to do from here. Right, I've just deferred this actual stick now, and now obviously I've got to shape this into a peaked crown, and I've got to shape this to be able to take my copper tip that I manufacture myself. I said if I was going to do a deer antler, obviously it would be flat there, and I've got one of two methods. I can either shape this into a plug, which would then be proud like this, and which I would then drill into the deer antler, use a glue and push it down, leave that to set, then sand it and merge it all as one. Or I could actually drill down through, use a piece of threaded bar which actually is really tight to the wood, use glue again, push that down, and the same process with the deer antler, and then sand, merge and finish off as the finish I would want. But that's a separate topic, and I am about to do one of those again for a customer very shortly, so I will do that on film so you guys can see how I go about that. But from here, what I got to do now is start shaping the actual crown, and I'll show you. It is a little bit brutal with the tools that you use, like rasps and that, and you have to remember the less damage you do to this, i.e. the less sanding that you have to do, and then obviously the finishing sanding you have to do, the better. So try not to over shall we say, score the wood by doing the removal and shaping, because obviously you then have to compensate that with extra sanding and finishing sanding on the end. This, even if we remove the fact we got no deer antler, I still have to get this to a fit for my copper tips, which are about 3 times the length of this, to be able to go over. Now if they were loose, it provides no benefit to the stick. If they're compression fitted, as you can imagine, that wood is armor cased within a metal copper tip of anywhere up to 2 inches long. So when I come to shape this, it is critical I keep it to the exact dimensions, which is 22mm of that copper cylinder, which does take some practice and some doing, because obviously as you remove wood you can't really put it back on, and you could easily ruin a perfectly beautiful piece of wood, which would be a really nice stick. So I'm going to just set myself up and I'll show you how I make this into a peaked handle. Right, as I've shown you, I've clearly cut the slant. they're with the lanyard holes in the correct position. Now I have to start rounding this area off and taking the top off and blending it all so you get that nice smooth contrast where it all flows in together. So what I should do is lock it somewhere. I've got like a wooden stand here which I use to cut wood, and it multi-purposes for woodworking projects. But I'm going to take should we say the biggest rasp, because I'm going to be looking to remove a lot of wood. So I'm going to get myself fully set up, and now I'm going to start taking it off. Now this is really taking a lot of wood off. Just those few passes, you can probably see it started to take a lot off there. So as you can see, I'm bringing it down and I'm beginning to shape and blend it into the finish I want. So I'll continue doing this, coming down a bit more to make the flow of the actual curve more, shall we say, natural. And I'm also aware that I've got to keep an eye on the top. As I come around the edge, you don't want to be too rough around the outsides, because you could split and take a chunk of wood out, and then you would have to make it a different kind of crown. You have no options, because you would have literally destroyed the tip. Right, as you can see, I'm just dancing with the rasp over the top there now. Right, I'm looking to get a uniformed, as you can see, now you can start to see I'm putting a curve on it, and I've got to kind of blend it all in. So I'm going to continue doing that a moment. Like I said, nothing about this process is too fast. For what somebody pays for a stick, the work that goes into this, realistically I'm not getting you know, a fair price. But at the end of the day, I enjoy the fact that there's some craftsmanship in this, and on top of that I enjoy the fact that people get some level of happiness, and obviously it's a useful product if you're out hiking. So I'm going to continue this and I'll bring you back in a moment. Right, I'm now using the small one, and for this I'm just going to actually just gently kiss the wood and go around. I'm not trying, it does bite, so you have to be very gentle now. I'm trying to give it just a little bit of a chamfer where the sandpaper can really do its work. I would suggest, if you're not confident with the tools and you don't want any chance of damaging the wood, I would suggest you use just coarse sandpaper and take the extra time. This is basically time saving for myself, where I can take a greater degree of wood off. And I've pretty much got the desired result I want. I'm just now just clearing it up so the sandpaper can do its job, and it's more a case of sanding out the marks rather than sanding the shape. But I'm going to put this to one side now, and now I'm going back to that very coarse pad I was going to show you. Right, this, because it's flexible, is where it comes into its own now. I can now start shaping. And because I've used that and took a large quantity of wood off, this is really starting to come together now under this pad. And like I said, if you're not confident around tools or cutting tools or rasps or files, and don't split the wood, just go straight to sandpaper, take the time. And indeed, if this is just a small little hobby, you're not doing too much of this, take your time, use your sandpaper and just enjoy the process, and not worry about taking chunks out of wood that you can't realistically put back. So yeah, I'm now just bringing all that shape together with this hard pad. But bear in mind, because this is aggressive, it is leaving a lot of, shall we say, marks in the wood. So that in itself means I'll have to do a lot more, shall we say, towards the finishing sanding. This is basically shaping sanding. So the less you can damage that you can do to the wood, or shall I say, less marks and less aggressive sanding you can do, the better. But I'm going to continue with this before I move and show you how I do the tip of the stick. Right then, so as you can see, I've got this now pretty much shaped where I want it. What I'm going to do now is, obviously, that's not the final product or sand. From here, obviously, that comes afterwards. I'm just getting the shape together now. I've sanded a few knots out which were intrusive, and now I'm going to move on to this end. Basically, I've got to get this now down to be able to accept this over it, as you can see, all the way up to about here. So I'll have to start merging this all down to 22 mil, and that will run for about 2 inches up the shaft. So as you can see, this end is quite critical now. I would suggest, if you're making your first stick, go to a rubber ferrule, and then gradually or even buy a commercial tip, because obviously there's no margins or less margins for error to make things, shall we say, not to fit correctly. So this is pretty much not a unique method. Many people do use copper as I'm doing, but to do it successfully and to make it shall we say, a viable option, you really need to know what you're doing first off. This is something you could then move into if this is your first attempt at stick making. But yeah, I'll now show you how I get that down. Right, I've got it set up on my workstation here, and you can see I've got the end I'm going to be shaping here. And as you can see, it's locked in against this piece of wood, and there's a wedge here. This is just to provide me stability while I shape. You'll obviously have to do this if you don't have anything comparable, by literally holding the stick, and it could be difficult to do this, but I'll just show you how I go about this, and you can see what you think of the end result, or how you would go about improving your process. Right, I've got a firm grip on this. Now I'm just taking, as you can see, just taking it off, and I'm taking a bit further up as well, because ultimately this has got to blend, and you'll see what I mean. Just bringing the stick around, lock it in again. As you can see, I'm working around. Basically, I'm working around the whole shaft of it here now. Right. There. It is a primitive setup, as you can see what I've got here, but it actually works. Like I say, it does lock the wood in. Yeah. Right, I'm going to continue going around like this, but obviously I'm working my way further up so it all blends in till I get to a point I can start getting technical with that, bringing it up and trying to marry it together, and basically doing the fine shaping, so this will run up a couple inches of basically a wooden peg. So I'll continue that. Right, I've done a fair bit here, and you can see I've taken a lot of wood off, and you can just see where I'm going with this now. This copper tip is just about at the point where I now need to move down to the smaller rasp to take some of this off up around here, just to make it flow better into this, and then I'll be going to do the more, shall we say, intricate work where this here, it's not got to slide on with your fingers. It's just got to marry against it so that I can hammer this home down through a couple inches so it sits in the wood through a compression fit. Not a slide-on fit, a compression fit. And that's the difference. So you can see I've still got a lot of work, but from here on in now, I will be doing things slow and gentle. Right, I now have the fully shaped stick I want. I have completed the actual tip. As you can see, my copper bit just goes on so far, and for the next should we say 2 inches is going to need compression fitting and hammering home. From here on in, it is entirely how you want to finish this stick, and I'm going to continue sanding through the grades till I get the desired result and leaving the bark that I want left on. This is all preference now, so I don't think there's any value in you watching me sand this stick to my preferred finish. That is something that you can do and find out yourselves. So I'll get this bit done, and then I'll show you how I then go about fitting my copper tip and take you through the next steps. But yes, from here on in, it's sanding till you get your desired finish or result. Right then, I've sanded my stick to how I want it, the finish I want, and the finish that will represent my brand of folklore, which is a heavily rural, kind of quirky, off-centre kind of brand of hiking stick. So I like to leave a few processing scars, bits of bark, and shall we say any quirkiness I like to leave in it. It just adds to that sense of where I'm from, shall we say, in the deep south, well, Cornwall basically, of the UK, and it fits firmly within my brand, shall we say, ethos. You yourself will have to keep sanding till you reach that point or your desired outcome. In effect, you would have gained nothing by just watching me sanding and doing what I'm doing to a stick, because everybody's got a personal preference. You could indeed spend days polishing it with finer grits to get something which is like glass, mirror polish. But obviously that's a preference, and like I said, I have my own, and my customers seem to value what I am trying to achieve. So it is now time to move on to the next step, and that is putting a copper tip to the stick. I use copper because of in my area mining is prevalent, being in Cornwall. Tin and copper were the main ores extracted, and yes, I have mines just a few miles away from me, and I use that to represent the heritage of my area. So yes, I'll take you along now and I'll show you how to make a tip, or how I make a tip and put on. Like I say, you will require some basic tools, and on top of that you will need to have a very small understanding of metalwork, nothing much, but I'll take you along. Right then, I've got some copper pipe, I've got a pipe cutter. I'm just going to measure out roughly what I would like to put on that tip. I've had a look, I've got a rough idea of what I need to put on to suit that particular stick, its style and possibly use. So I've actually got a measure which I've engraved on my workbench, just out of ease, so I don't have to keep getting a tape measure out to do it. So basically I will marry up the actual pipe to my measurement on the table. You don't need to see this because you'll use your own measurements, but this is just me doing it. And I will now bring it across and start cutting. these pipe cutters are pretty basic in themselves. You just clip them around at the measurement you want and you just go round. And then you end up with a nice piece of copper you can work. I used to use hacksaws, but it meant a lot more finishing because obviously you never got a complete little, shall we say, cylinder like that. But the problem with that is you get a crushed in end. Now this has got to go over the wood, and then shall we say it's got to slide over the wood. So I'll just give you a quick idea of what we're trying to do. This is the tip of my finger. You're trying to get this on, but obviously you don't want that wood to be like my finger where it can rattle about, because that's not going to do any good. It's just going to eventually snap the wood inside and, well, the stick would be useless. This is where the skill comes into it, getting that wood to a slightly just bigger size than this, so that when this goes on, so another finger bigger one, it goes on, it's on firm and it won't push on. So you hammer it on and the wood swells inside the copper against the walls, and it becomes, shall we say, as good as a solid item. It's compression fitted. With a couple tacks which are countersunk onto that, it won't move anywhere. You'll never get it off. That is a complete item now for the entirety of that stick. So that's what you're trying to achieve here. But in doing so, you have to now file away one end. That is so it will start its journey on the wood, because that's, as you can see, has been rounded over by the very action of this cutter compressing the copper and cutting it. So I'm now going to do that. I'm going to go get a file and we'll go and make that end there, shall we say, able to marry up to the stick's tip. Right, I've got a file here, and basically what I'm going to do, I'm going to put this on a little V I've got in my workbench, which is convenient so it holds the copper pipe firm, and I'm going to file basically going around like that till I take that whole edge off and it's just a complete flat edge facing forward, nothing crimped in. So I will complete that task and then I'll come back to you again in a moment. Right, I've completed that. I've gone completely around and I've took that chamfer off, and I'm now going to just run a bit of sandpaper around, being really cautious of copper filings and splinters because you don't want to get them embedded in your finger. So I'm going to do that, and then we're going to move on to the next stage of countersinking this copper sleeve to be able to accept a couple tacks that will then go into the hiking stick just to aid this staying in place. So yeah, we're going to move on now, and we'll complete the next task. Right, you can clearly see I've got that sleeve in a vise, being very gentle because it is copper. It has to be treated with a bit of respect. I'm now going to drill or countersink, and this is, you with copper, as with the filing, you have to be, should we say, respectful of the metal itself. Hence you need to have a little bit of understanding of how to work metal, but obviously we're doing nothing technical or extremely, should we say, difficult. It's just being a little bit aware of what you're doing. So I'm now going to countersink this copper sleeve. So we'll begin that task now. Right. That's all I want to do, and that is to provide a countersink, if you can see that in the sleeve. I'm now going to put that back in, and with a hammer and a small punch, being very, shall we say, respectful to the metal, I'm just punching through the wall of that countersink. As you can see, I have a hole there now that will accept a tack that will run through the sleeve and into the actual hiking stick. And I'm going to repeat that process again on the opposite side, just a fraction further down. Right then, I've now got myself set up here, and I'm going to introduce some boiled linseed oil to the actual tip. I'm not looking to soak it. All I'm looking to do is just put just enough boiled linseed on the area that my sleeve is going to go. I'm then going to put a very small bit inside there. This is adding to the sleeve being able to slide down over onto the wood, and also it's soaking into the wood, adding a layer of waterproofing for the stick in the future. So basically, I've got myself set up. You need to be careful, boiled linseed oil. If you've got it around rags or anything like that, it will self-combust. So you need to keep a clean area, and any items that you've used on or for the boiled linseed oil, you either need to dispose of or clean correctly. So that's just a warning, it will self-combust. So always read the manufacturer's labels to any products you're going to use and take the necessary safety precautions. Right then, so basically I'm now just painting the tip, just giving it a bit of boiled linseed oil. I'm being very careful not to be too enthusiastic in coating everything. It's just getting a very light coat here, like so. There, just around. I will then put this one out the way, so I do not want this boiled linseed oil to go everywhere. I am now going to get the sleeve, and I'm now giving that a coat of boiled linseed oil inside. Like I said, you don't want too much where you're swamping everything. It's just about providing a bit of protection for the wood and also enabling the sleeve to slide on. Right then, I've get my stick here. I've got it on a soft pad that is covered in plastic, so I can dispose of the plastic if any boiled linseed oil is to fall onto it. So I'm now going to put the sleeve on top. That's just gone on, and I've worked it down as far as it's going to go. I have a wooden dowel which I can use on top of the copper to stop myself damaging the copper when I compress it down onto the wood. As you can see, I'm just gently tapping and working my way, stopping every now and again to see what I'm doing. It's beginning to dig in a little bit there, but that's okay. I'm going to have a saw later on, which I'll go around to remove any curls from where the sleeve is cut in and dragged down, because obviously the sleeve is getting tighter to the wood as it goes down through. Always stop and have a look. It's pointless hitting and hitting if you're getting nowhere. I have now reached the bottom, and I'm happy with that. I can now examine what I've got to do here now. Right, you can see I've got a few curls there now. I am now going to go and trim those off outside. I now have the sleeve finished. I just trimmed up the edge with the saw as I showed you. I'm now going to put some tacks in those countersunk holes that we made in the sleeve now. So that is our next job. Right, I've got a protective piece of wood full of copper in the vise, which the copper is now resting on. I'm going to bring it round till I find a hole the countersinked one that we made. I have a tack here. I'm just going to place it in the hole. I'm going to hold it, and now I'm just going to gently tap this in. It'll push through that copper, making the hole that little bit bigger. You can see there now it's in place, and I'm ready to take that right the way through. Shouldn't take much pressure. Driven home, and you can see that is really clean. That's gone in really nice. I'm now going to do to the one on the opposite side, and then I shall be finished till I move on to the next step. Right, that's my copper tip fully completed and on. That'll never come off. That's been, should we say, compression fitted, and now it's time just to give the head and down to about here a gentle coating of boiled linseed oil. I'm then going to let it soak overnight, and I'll come back and then I'll work on the next stage. But because you've worked the wood on the tip and the handle, and it's had a lot of aggressive work done to it, it's best just to allow a bit of boiled linseed oil to soak into the wood, re-nourish it, regenerate it, in the sense that it's got something protecting it and stopping it wanting to open up due to any moisture in the atmosphere or temperature changes. So I'm just going to give this, like I said, just a little coat of boiled linseed oil. I'll work it into where the lanyard goes as well, because that does need waterproofing, because if you're a serious hiker, obviously water will track from the lanyard right the way through into where we've just drilled this hole. So as you can see, I'm pushing oil in there, and I'm now just coating the head, and then I'll hang this up and wait till tomorrow. I'll let this dry. Well, this is the day after, and it hasn't gone totally to plan as regard to hiking sticks. We've been battered by winds and storms, and there was a break in the weather, so I did something which most surfers do. I closed the door, loaded my surf gear, and I scuttled off down the coast, and I surfed and came back, did what I had to do with the kids. Now it's dark outside, and I'm now back in the workshop to, should we say, continue with this stick. The customer is actually coming on Friday, and I've got 3 days left. And that might sound like a long time, but obviously I've now tonight got to get a very light coat of oil on it to actually seal the wood and provide some protection and dry in itself, to allow me time to put some coats of polyurethane on top. But before we even get to that, my hiking sticks, I in most cases do little burnt on woodland animal designs. Stags are very popular, so are hares, foxes, little songbirds. We also do a moorland collection, which involves, shall we say, moorland ponies, highland cows, which people just seem to absolutely love. You do a highland cow on a stick, I could probably charge £1 million, but no, in reality, if I put a highland cow on a stick, hiking stick, people just snap it up straight away. But anyway, the lady in question has already had a hiking stick off me at some point, and hers was a hare. And this stick that I'm in the process of showing you how I go about it, she would like a fox. I suppose that makes kind of the matching set, doesn't it, really? Like the hare and fox, the eternal battle between, shall we say, the fast and stealthy and the cunning and slightly mischievous. So yeah, it makes sense, I suppose. So I'm about to do a fox, burn a fox on, and I'll take you through that as I do it. Well, there's the stick in question. Pretty much as we left it after I oiled the tip and put the copper tip on and put some oil on the crown. That's all dry. It feels lovely and smooth, and it's brought up some really lovely colours in that wood. So I'm going to remove this now and take this into the workshop and start the process of my artwork. Right then, I've got my stick, I'm looking along it, and I'm looking to place the design which isn't going to be interrupted too much by any features on the stick, i.e. bits of bark or knots which when you're burning might not give you a good solid line, or they might interrupt the look by being darker within the actual design itself, thus not looking so effective, the actual piece of artwork. So you'll have to take that into consideration. And also when you're burning, some barks will just disintegrate with the heat, leaving a big void. So what was a smooth line, you hit a patch of bark sometimes and it will open up like a chasm, and that will interrupt the flow of the look of the actual finished, should we say, picture that you're doing. So there's a lot to take into consideration, and that is a topic in its own right, doing artwork with wood burning. But I'm just going to show you, this is the method that I'm using. I would stress that you need to be careful with burning, because obviously, yet again, wood and heat. I recommend you get a proper wood burner that's, should we say, purposely designed and made to actually do this. I'm improvising with one I use actually for soldering wires and things like that, but I'm proficient in it, and I've been using it for so long now, it does the job for me. But I would recommend you get a proper one that's dedicated to the purpose of artwork through wood burning. So basically, I'm not proficient to wood burn freehand. I prefer to draw, and then I can alter my drawings, and then after I've drawn, I will then get the wood burner, switch it on, have another cup of tea, chocolate biscuit, and come back when it's nice and hot, and then follow what I've drawn. If you draw, you can always correct yourself. It's rehashing the same design twice, drawing it and then burning it, and sometimes, you know, it can get a drag, particularly if I'm doing 3 or 4 of these a day, and I've got to draw and then wood burn, follow what I've just done. Whereas if I was, shall we say, a proficient, well, proficient artist, I could actually just burn freehand. But I'm not, so that's where I'm to. So I've now got to draw my design on the wood. I've selected where I want it to go. I see where I want to put my logo, and I'm going to draw my fox head, and we'll go from there in a moment. Right then, hopefully you can just about make out that penciled sketch on the wood. As you can see, it's not heavily detailed, it's just giving me the outline to work with, the proportions, so I don't end up with, like, say, one ear that looks like it's 3 times larger compared to the nose or the mane of the actual fox. That's a reasonable, shall we say, depiction of a fox head, and I will burn that on now, and you'll see that process. If I make any corrections to my drawings, I just use a standard rubber. But if you're using rubber on wood, you need to be careful you don't get one that's too oily. Some rubbers will have like oily compounds in them, which will leave traces on the wood themselves. I can't help you on that. That's just trial and error, and I've just gone through the kids' shall we say, pencil bag, so I found a rubber that doesn't leave any marks on the actual wood. That's something literally that was trial and error for me with the kids' drawing sets. But anyway, I've got a rubber that doesn't leave any marks. I just thought I'd get that out there, because if you go to try and correct yourself and you leave a load of oily, shall we say, smears with shall we say, lead marks and everything all over the wood, it means basically you've got to literally get a fine piece of sandpaper, re-sand that back to take all that mess away, and then come back and do your drawing again, meaning extra work for yourself. But right, okay, I'm going to now get the wood burner plugged in and get it warm and to temperature. I can now start burning. Right, this is still heating up. It's just basically, as you can see, a soldering iron with a pointed tip. I use this in other purposes. It's not the correct tool for the job. Think safety, guys. Don't follow as I do. Go and get the proper tool. I'm only just demonstrating what I do to achieve my product. So yeah, always go for the proper tool, and on top of that, with everything you see me do, I would always invest or check out the correct safety procedures and follow, shall we say, recommended safety guidelines in anything. Power tools, anything, use safety equipment and use the correct tool for the right job. I'll come on to a story there. I was burning with this during the summer. Pair of shorts. I just had to stick in my lap and I was in a hurry, and basically I was doing a quantity. We had a sale, like the sales were on and holiday makers were down, and I had to get some sticks together, and yeah, so I was rushing and it actually slipped off the wood, ran across my leg for about 3 inches at full heat, and I left a scar as big as your little finger and possibly that long right across my thigh. It may be worth a look sometime when I go surfing. I might just show you guys, but yeah, it was pretty bad and pretty deep, possibly on the verge of possibly needing medical attention, but I looked after it, and you know, here I am, shall we say, in the winter, and I've just got a massive scar, and I've got to make a story up to go with that scar now, so it sounds a bit cooler than you know, I was wood burning and I accidentally ran a hot iron across my leg. But that's another particular story I'm going to have to come up with. But yeah, so basically this is a soldering iron I'm using, and it's still getting hot. I do have one thing I do like. I do have lights on it, so I can actually see, particularly in a dark, or shall we say not a dark, but a workshop, which I'm in quite often, shall we say, in the, shall we say, twilight hours, doing things like this. So it's all helps. Yeah, so I have got a big set of old overalls I use. They're on my lap. I'm not having any more accidents, and like I said, I've got the stick. From here on in, it's just me tracing those lines I put there, filling in detail, shading, and doing the likes of that. Yet again, as with the sanding, there's no value in you watching me do this, because obviously if you were ever going down this route, you would have to do your own practicing, find your own techniques, and indeed work with the tools in a different manner than I am, because obviously, as I've just stated, you will have a proper tool and you won't be using a soldering iron. But yeah, so there's no value in you seeing anything I do here. I'm just going to complete this task. I'll let you have a look at it, and then we'll discuss what we're going to do from there on in. So there you have the fox design done on the actual stick. You can see that. It's a pretty good representation. And obviously my logo of Folklore. So now this stick is going to get some oil now. I'm going to use boiled linseed oil and do the rest of the actual stick, and it's going to be hung up to dry till tomorrow. So we'll start that process. Right then, as you can see, I've got a tin there, or tub, with some holes in it. I wash the brushes after I've used boiled linseed, and then I put them inside that tub, and then I put that outside and store it in a place. It's actually stored just under the barbecue area, but if there ever was an occasion for the boiled linseed to self-combust, if I or had not done a thorough job, there would be no harm done. Boiled linseed oil, you must treat this with respect. If it's anywhere and it's not cleaned up correctly, and any items used in the cleanup not disposed of correctly, it can self-combust. So please be very aware of that. Right, we have the stick now ready. It's burnt on the designs. I'm happy with it. Remember, we boiled linseeded the handle and the actual tip and the wood around there. So we don't need to go overboard in these areas. If I was just going to do a boiled linseed finish, I would saturate this wood, put a heavy coat on and allow it up to 3 days to soak in and dry. As I'm going to be using polyurethane, this will have a very light dusting of a coat. It'll just be a very, should we say, basically a small little lick of boiled linseed. So it dries in, I can then clean the stick and then start applying polyurethane to it. But first job, like I said, is now to get a brush and give this a very light coat of boiled linseed. Now, the brush I'm using has very fine hairs, and it allows me to put a very nice even flow of oil into the wood, and I can actually work it into the wood without damaging the wood because they're soft. So I'm just going over the handle again. Basically, because the boiled linseed oil adds a slight honey colour to the wood, I will have to do the same area I've already done just to allow it to flow and match in. Right, I'm now working down the actual stick, and it's already soaking that. This wood is well seasoned. It's already soaking that in. You can see how the colours are starting to come out, and any shall we say imperfections of the process from when I've been crafting the stick, or even when I was harvesting the stick, they now sink back into the wood. They no longer look prominent, and it just adds that look of, shall we say, kind of rural folk country sort of like a feel about the stick. So yeah, boiled linseed does do a lot of rejuvenating of the wood in itself, but also in its looks. So like I said, I'm just putting very light coats on, and I'm working the whole stick. Like I said, if I was not going to be polyurethaning this particular stick, I would give it a nice heavy coat and really work it in. Right, I've got this stick hanging up now to dry. That oil was really bringing out some really nice colours in that wood, and I'm happy with my design, fox design on the stick, and obviously my logo. As you can see, that oil really has brought out that hazelwood really nice. And like I said, any of the processing scars or shall we say marks, it just seems to add a little bit of flavour to that stick. It's straight, but it's just got that very small little curve here and there, just there, and it comes back into the straight profile. So it gives it that unique, not processed look about it, where, you know, like factory made. You can see this has got some real rural charm. Yeah, I'm liking this one. Now it's for me to clean up and allow this stick to absorb that oil over, well, the next, should we say, 12, 18 hours. Hi, okay, it's the next day and the stick has absorbed all the oil and it's looking really nice. There's some nice creams. There's some nice tans, some chocolate colours of where the knots have been. The stick itself is looking really, really nice. I'm really happy with this one. The design is really standing out quite prominent. The oil has brought all that out. The surrounding wood around it has drawn the oil in, and it's left the dark burn of the design really prominent. It's looking nice. I'm happy with this. And now we're going to polyurethane this stick. I shall probably give it 2 coats of polyurethane, and that should be enough. If it was just going to be polyurethane, I would probably do 3 coats. But like I said, this has had a layer of, shall we say, boiled linseed, so it's got that protection there. I'll put an undercoat of polyurethane, then I'll put a top coat, a finishing coat on the top. This stick has absorbed all the oil, but I always give it a wipe over just to take any residue slag left behind. Sometimes as the oil dries, you can get residue product left in little nooks and crannies that hasn't fully gone, so we will remove that. So you're starting with a clean base to put the polyurethane on. So basically I'm just going to not wipe too hard, because you've got to remember that you're not looking to dislodge any fibres in the wood. All you're looking to do is just basically give it a gentle wipe over like this, right the way down to the tip. And I'm just gently working back up through, making sure there's nothing left on the stick. Obviously, if I was doing just a boiled linseed coat as my finishing coat as well, even if I put a saturation coat on like I described to you earlier, if the wood was really hungry and it sucked all that oil in, I possibly would have to go and give it another light coat just to make sure that wood was fully protected with that boiled linseed oil. But as I said to you, and as I'll just repeat again, I'm going to be putting polyurethane. I actually prefer the boiled linseed finish, because you feel the wood, you feel the grain, you can actually feel it. It feels more traditional, shall I say. But obviously polyurethane puts a nice shiny coat on it. It provides a little bit of durability in the protection. But as I've said, everybody's got their own preference. Like I said, so you'll have to take your pick on that. So yeah, so I'm just going to continue just giving it a quick little wipe over, and then we'll give it some coats of polyurethane. I'm going to be using a spray can of polyurethane, quite simply because I can direct the flow. I can get good even coverage. It tends to not run as much as painted polyurethane, and on top of that, it allows me to, shall I say, get a good idea of the actual coverage I will need to do for the next coat. Yeah, I've said I will give it 2 coats, but yet again, as I've said, if I feel it needs a 3rd coat, I will do. As with everything, The painted, or should we say paint on polyurethane, comes in tins of various sizes. But as a manufacturer, or a small time manufacturer, so I stress, with that tin being open and closed as I do batches of sticks, I found that I end up having the polyurethane go, shall we say, jellified before I actually get to use the whole product in a tin. Which is quite wasteful and financially for me, because obviously it's all got to be taken into cost. The spray can does work better, and i.e. I don't have the added cost of cleaning brushes and things like that. So you'll have to make, and I'm sure if you're just doing one stick or a few sticks as like a kind of hobby thing, that kind of issue won't be concerning you. But obviously, as I've said, opening and closing tins, and should say the actual polyurethane going off, and not being workable, and losing vast quantities of it, it's just easier to stick to this method that I'm using now. As just a word of caution, if you're using anything of this sort of like polyurethane, you need to be in a ventilated area, you need to be wearing a mask and eye protection gloves, the full shebang really. For me today, I'm able to spray my stick outdoors. There's no wind, it's a mild day, I shall be spraying it outdoors. I shall then bring it back into the workshop to go off, and it'll be not on the outside workshop, it'll be in this part of the workshop which has heating which is connected to the house, so it's slightly warmer, like room temperature. So yes, I do have that particular luxury, which you might not have, but yet again I do have to stress safety. You know, read the labels, do what they recommend with any product you're going to use. And on that note, any rags or should we say cleaning implements that you've used for that boiled linseed oil clean on the stick, make sure you dispose of those in the correct method, because as I've already said, you don't want anything to go up in smoke due to it being self-combustible, so always take care. I will be wearing a mask even though I'm spraying outdoors, quite simply for the fumes and any blowback of spray. Like I said, safety first, guys. Right, I've got the stick up outdoors as you can see, and I will be spraying it in 4 quadrants. Basically the side here, the front, the back, and then I'll remove the stick and come in from this angle. You do not want to be trying to achieve a coverage in one go, because you won't get an even coverage. So basically I'm just going to start now at the top and just go down. Right, from here you just need to work it down through. You don't want too much on or else you'll get runs. Now as you can see, I'm getting a nice coverage because I'm also going back over what I've just done. Just going back up to have a look. Yes, that looks okay. Now I'm going to do the handle. There, there, and it's little sprays. Not too close because that will give you runs. Not too far away because you will lose products. As you can see, I'm coming down now. There. Just little blips with the can and spray. This is only the first coat. This is just to get a coat of polyurethane. You've got another coat, maybe another one after that. Here I go again. Coming down over the stick, giving some nice coverage. There. From here, I now have to take that stick off the top, spin it around so I've got access to the back. I'm going to do that now. Right, that stick is in here now drying with some of the other ones. It's in dust-free environment now so that you're not going to get dust on that product. It will take however long it takes to dry, but I will probably come back tomorrow morning to give that its second coat. Obviously I buy my cordage for the lanyard in, shall I say, bulk. I'm going to cut this to length just to save time, burn the ends off to stop it running back through, so that'll be ready to fit. And basically, even though it doesn't take very long, it's another job I can just do and get out the way now. Yet again, I've already got marks on my bench to give me my generic or average cord length. So basically, I'm just marking it on the table where it's got to be, and I've just got an ordinary pair of sharp snips, and I'm just going to cut it, and just making my way through it. Let's cut through, cut that out of the way. I'm left with my cord. I've now got to burn the ends. Nothing technical, but I'll just give you a quick demonstration. As you can see, the ends are all frayed. If that was left like that, over time that would run back through. This is a man-made fibre, so I can actually seal the ends with a flame. Obviously, you don't want to hold flame there too long because it's going to catch fire, and we don't want that. So yet again, safety guys, you know, I'm just putting it out there. It's just a case just to get it hot enough so it melts and seals itself. Now you can see what I'm doing here. It's just going black, it's sealing, bit of smoke, there you go. So you can see what's happened there. That's going over, and it's as it cools, it's drawing back on itself, it's shrinking. So I'm getting a nice like mushroomed head on that piece there. Same again to the other end. Lighter there, just had a bit of a blowback. Right, oh. There, just getting that going, just twiddling it around, bit of smoke. Right, there you go. And as that cools, it's shrinking back over on itself. Yeah, so that's basically it now. Obviously these ends are quite hot. It's hot plastic basically, or a man-made fibre. So basically I just need to put this out of the way so nobody picks it up by the ends. It will cool down pretty quick, but obviously you don't want nobody just grabbing this and getting a bit of hot plastic on their skin. So that job's now finished. This is ready for me to fit when I get to that point. But that will be tomorrow. I'll have to give it another coat. And this will be the final job I do to the stick. Yeah, hello, it's another day. Obviously that stick was drying for 24 hours. It's the following morning. I've got to do a few chores. I've got the chickens to feed. I'm going to scamper for a very quick surf today. I'm under a lot of pressure to get back. There's a lot to be done. And I have a few domestic chores which I have to take care of myself. That said, I'm just going to quickly touch on time. If I say I'm going to make a stick for an individual, I always allow 7 days. That might seem excessive, but I always allow for drying time, particularly if polyurethane is involved, because I've had some occasions, particularly when weather conditions have changed, or shall we say it goes from being cold and dry to, shall we say, very wet and with a lot of moisture content in the air. Polyurethane can react differently. I have said this workshop is heated. It is, but it's only a single skin workshop, so obviously temperature and moisture is a big factor. And I've had some sticks where I've literally had to strip the polyurethane back and then redo the actual finish on the stick. So you must always allow time if, shall we say, things go wrong. And that being said, from the whole process you've just watched, whether straightening a stick, you actually the stick doesn't make it through that, it snaps, and you have to factor that in because straightening isn't a guaranteed process. You can lose a stick through it cracking naturally because of stresses on the wood, overheating, the stick just naturally just giving way under its own, shall we say, flaws within the wood. And then shaping the stick, you could, you know what I mean, you could make a disastrous mistake on the shaping and it be not, shall we say, usable in the configuration you shaped it. And then there's obviously fitting the tip. You could split the head fitting the tip when you hammer it on, or compression fit it. Or you could damage the tip. You can try to shorten the stick and bring it back, but you might not get the original stick you're after for the customer. And then obviously the finishing, like I said, you do have to allow a week, so that allows for any eventuality which you can try to correct. Right, I'm making my way down to the chickens. That's going to be cold. At least it's dry. I've dried it off since my last surf. But yeah, as regard to sticks, you need to give yourself time to make any corrections. I'm just going to say this is also, I forgot to say about straightening a stick. Sometimes wood will pull back. You can straighten it, but the natural tendency, if you're using dry heat, sometimes it will actually push back against that and it won't fully stay in form. Not every stick, I would say probably 1 in 20 you may have to reheat it at some stage and bring back. So basically, yes, you are got to be aware that you have to give yourself time to rectify any mistakes. Now looking out over there, I can see the windmills way on the hill and it's an easterly wind, so I'm going to be able to get a surf. But first I've got to go in and give it that finishing coat. I've just hung it up outside and I've got a reasonably good coverage on that first coat. It's gone off satisfactory, so I'm now going to give it what I'm hoping will be its top coat. But obviously that will be determined by the finish once that is dried tomorrow. So yeah, this stick is looking quite nice now for a customer. So right, I'm going to go get the spray can and start again. Bear in mind, it'll be the same process, breaking the stick up into quadrants, and then turning the stick around and doing the back. So basically breaking it down so I get good even coverage. Just willy-nilly spraying like this, you won't get a good coverage. Always break it down into 4 quadrants. Right then, I am now going to give that stick its 3rd coat. The situation basically is I can see a few places that I just need to build it up to, should we say, give that slight smoother feel around the handle. As I keep alluding to, this isn't a one-stop shop how you should do. Every stick will be different, and indeed every aspect to your stick making will be controlled by measures possibly sometimes outside of anything that you can do yourself. But you have to learn and adapt, and that's where the, shall we say, craftsmanship of making sticks comes. It's one of those things you can show somebody, you can teach somebody, but ultimately you learn through doing the process, and you learn how to overcome situations, work around, and you learn how indeed to be flexible in your craft to produce that finished item. Now, I could leave it where it is, but for me, I'm looking at it, holding it, and I think to myself, I just believe another coat there would just add that little finishing touch. I would be happy to let it go, but for me, my inner self, I just feel it would, another coat there would be the right thing in my mind. So I'm going to do that now. Same process, hang it up outside, divide the stick into quadrants, and give it a coat of polyurethane. So yes, you will have to, you know, adapt yourself to the varying situations that can happen. And stick making is no different than any other craft that you do, whether it be painting, carving, pottery and things like that. You will encounter bumps along the road which you will have to adapt to. Yet again, 4 different quadrants, and I'm going to base my, shall we say, most of my attention on the handle area. So give the can a good shake. Also, you do not want to be using very cold cans of polyurethane. That in itself needs to be kind of room temperature. Give it a quick spray out in the air just to allow the thinners within the product to clear the nozzle. Right, here I go. Same again, and I'll just repeat this on the handle, giving it just a little bit heavier dusting here, and then coming down there, coming through on the next side, there. Right, that's had a reasonably nice little dusting. I now have to take it off and do the back. I've actually got that stick finished in regards to the finishing coat of polyurethane. I did run into a few problems with that on its last coat. Basically, I then had to polish out and shall we say sand, but in essence what you're really doing is polishing out to get that mirror finish that you're looking for. Sometimes that just happens that you will have to, that can be, as I've already described, temperature differences and things like that, where you're not 100% satisfied with the finish, which means you'll have to polish out, reapply, then polish out and reapply. It's extra work and extra effort. I didn't show that quite simply because that was an extremely drawn out procedure, and something you would probably only warrant doing if you were doing it for somebody else and a customer. If you're doing this stick for yourself, you would have been more than happy with that initial finishing coat. But as I'm doing this for somebody else, obviously there's a little bit of, I'll use the word professional pride. And on top of that, I am obliged to do the best job I can for the customer. So hence, like I said, this stick did prove to be that little bit more, shall we say, of a challenge time-wise than what I anticipated. But it's done. I'm pleased with the result, particularly the handle. Like I said, it is baby smooth and it's looking really nice. Now, to just finish this off, I'm going to attach the lanyard. Now, as I've showed you before, I use a nice 8mm soft man-made fibred bit of cordage. It's very soft, as you can see. There's no resistance or effort. This will double up, and when it's in your hand and you're using it, it really is soft, and it makes it a very, shall we say, easy workable lanyard in difficult conditions when you're putting a lot of stress on it. But anyway, getting back to what I'm going to do, basically is just thread it through. Obviously it does help if you have done the hole to pretty much the same. Forcing things through and pulling and that, you could end up splintering some of the wood on either side the hole. So it's always best to work with, shall we say, sizes which accommodate anything you're trying to put through it. So I just threaded it through like this, and it's a very simple knot I'm going to do. And because this cord is soft, this simple double knot, when I say a double knot, all I'm doing is taking two ends like this, feeding through, coming back over the top and pulling down like that. Now this, with this cordage, won't slip through. As you can see, it just pulls down nice and it really stays firm. But because it's just knotted in this configuration, I can just loosen it, slide it up or bring it down to make the adjustments easily and fast. So yes, here I am, the finished stick. I've got the fox head there as requested. right the way through the copper tip, and it's got like a very nice whitish wood finish to this one, and I'm very pleased with it. So I'm going to call this a day on this video, and let's say, and allow the customer to come and pick their stick up. Well, there, that was the process I employed to make a simple hiking stick. Obviously, attaching any sort of antler and things like that is a separate issue altogether. I usually follow the same process in manufacture, except attaching the antler, which I will show at some other stage. I've got one in the process that's been ordered that I have to do, so I'll show that. But I hope you seen and appreciated the kind of effort that goes into a hiking stick. For the money that I do charge, it's possibly, should we say, I undervalue myself, but it's just, shall I say, a labour of love, and it's kind of a paid hobby, and I enjoy doing what I do. So and it provides me with just that little bit of how can I put it this way, when I'm in the woods selecting and cutting sticks as the raw material, there's always a certain, shall we say, element that you've got like a worth of being in the woods. You feel connected even more so by producing a product from the woods itself. And I hope my sticks sort of like give that kind of rural, shall we say, backwater feel, like from the woodlands, and they don't look over processed and manufactured, and that's the look I'm kind of after. But anyway, I'm gonna sign out here, and I hope like you've really enjoyed seeing how things happen in stick making. So I'll sign out from here, Andy.